At 6:17 on a cold Tuesday morning, 29-year-old Elena Brooks was found dead inside her apartment. Her front door was locked. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing valuable appeared to be missing, and the neighbor who called the police was the last person anyone would have suspected. His name was Daniel Mercer. He lived directly across the hallway. For nearly 6 years, Daniel had been considered one of the quietest men in the building. He worked from home as an insurance claims analyst, rarely had visitors, never caused problems, and always seemed willing to help his neighbors. He carried groceries for elderly residents. He collected packages when people were away, and he had even earned the trust of Elena Brooks. She had given him a spare key to her apartment months earlier after locking herself out twice. That small decision would eventually become one of the most important details in the entire case. But on the morning Elena died, nobody knew that yet. At 6:17 a.m., Daniel called emergency services. His voice was calm, almost unnaturally calm. He told the dispatcher that Elena wasn't answering her door and that he could see something was wrong through the gap beneath it. When officers arrived 8 minutes later, they found Elena lying beside her kitchen table. She was dead. There was a small wound to the back of her head. A broken coffee mug lay nearby. At first, investigators considered an accident. Maybe Elena had fallen. Maybe she had struck her head on the table. But the medical examiner quickly ruled that out. The injury was inconsistent with a simple fall. Elena had been struck deliberately. And according to the preliminary examination, she had died sometime between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. That immediately raised a question. Who had been inside her apartment during those 3 hours? And more importantly, how had they gotten inside? Before we uncover what happened inside Elena's apartment, if you enjoy fictional true crime stories that feel disturbingly real, subscribe to A Darker Shade of Truth. Because sometimes the most frightening crimes don't happen in dark alleys. Sometimes they're happening right next door. Now back to the case. The building had security cameras in the lobby and parking area. Detectives reviewed the footage. No strangers entered the building that night. No one was seen leaving Elena's floor. But at 12:43 a.m., Daniel Mercer appeared on the hallway camera. He was standing outside Elena's apartment. He remained there for approximately 40 seconds. Then he walked back to his own apartment. When detectives asked him why, Daniel didn't hesitate. He said Elena had texted him. She was having trouble with her television. He claimed he had gone over to help. The explanation sounded reasonable, until investigators checked Elena's phone. There was no text message from her. Not at 12:43. Not that night. Not even earlier that evening. Daniel was shown the phone records. His expression changed. Only slightly. Then he said he must have misunderstood. Maybe Elena had called him. Investigators checked. There was no call either. That was the first time detectives began looking closely at Daniel. They searched his apartment the following afternoon. They found nothing obvious. No blood. No weapon. No damaged clothing. No photographs of Elena. No hidden trophies. Nothing that screamed murderer. But forensic investigators noticed something inside Daniel's washing machine. A pair of dark jeans had been washed recently. That meant very little by itself, until the laboratory found microscopic traces of Elena's blood on one of the pant legs. Daniel insisted the blood came from months earlier. He said Elena had cut her finger while cooking and that he had helped clean up. The problem was that the blood on the jeans was mixed with another substance, a cleaning chemical. Investigators believed the jeans had been washed shortly after the blood was deposited. Daniel was arrested 2 days later. But the evidence was still largely circumstantial. There was no murder weapon, no eyewitness, no confession, and Daniel's lawyer argued that the blood could have been transferred accidentally. For several weeks, the case appeared to be heading nowhere. Then detectives discovered something Elena had never told anyone. 3 weeks before her death, she had filed a complaint with the building manager. She claimed someone had been entering her apartment while she was away. Nothing valuable was stolen. Instead, small objects were being moved. A photograph turned face down. A book shifted from one shelf to another. A kitchen chair moved several inches. Elena thought someone was trying to frighten her. The building manager had dismissed the complaint, but Elena had kept a journal. Detectives found it inside a drawer beneath her bed. The final entry was dated 3 days before her death. It read, "I know it's him. He's been watching me for months. I don't know what he wants. There was no name, but there was something else. A description. He knows when I leave. He knows when I come home. He knows everything. Detectives compared the description with Daniel's routine. It matched. Daniel worked from home. He could see the building entrance from his window. He knew when Elena left for work. He knew when she returned. And because he had her spare key, he could enter her apartment without breaking anything. But investigators still needed to know why. What could possibly make a seemingly ordinary neighbor turn against the woman living across the hallway? The answer came from Elena's laptop. She had been researching Daniel. Months earlier, Elena had become suspicious after discovering that several insurance claims connected to Daniel's company appeared fraudulent. At first, she thought it was simply a workplace issue. But the more she investigated, the more she realized Daniel wasn't merely processing suspicious claims. He appeared to be creating them. Fake accidents, fake thefts, fake property damage. The amounts were small enough to avoid immediate attention, but there were dozens of them. Elena had copied documents onto a flash drive. That flash drive was missing, and suddenly, investigators understood something. Elena wasn't killed randomly. She may have been killed because she knew too much. If you're enjoying the mystery so far, take a second to subscribe to A Darker Shade of Truth. We tell fictional crime stories built around one question. What happens when the person you trust the most is hiding something monstrous? Now, investigators had to find the missing evidence. They searched Daniel's apartment again. This time they found the flash drive. It was hidden inside an old computer speaker. The files contained everything Elena had discovered. Names, dates, bank accounts, fake claims, and payments. Daniel had been stealing money through fraudulent insurance claims for years. Elena had discovered the operation. Daniel knew she had, and investigators believed he killed her to prevent her from exposing him. But there was still one final piece missing: the murder weapon. Investigators searched the dumpsters behind the building. Eventually, they found a hammer. It had been cleaned thoroughly. Yet forensic technicians noticed something inside a tiny crack beneath the handle. A trace of blood. DNA testing confirmed it belonged to Elena. The evidence was finally overwhelming. At trial, prosecutors reconstructed the final night. They believed Daniel entered Elena's apartment using the spare key. He confronted her about the files. An argument followed. Elena threatened to expose him. Daniel grabbed the hammer. One blow ended the argument. Afterward, he cleaned the apartment, washed his clothes, and returned to his own apartment. Then, nearly 7 hours later, he called the police. He wanted to appear helpful. He wanted to be the neighbor who discovered the body. But investigators had noticed something Daniel hadn't considered. The hallway camera showed him standing outside Elena's door at 12:43 a.m. And when detectives asked him why he was there, he lied. That lie became the beginning of the investigation. Daniel Mercer was convicted of Elena Brooks' murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But the most disturbing part of the case wasn't the murder itself. It was how close Elena had been living to the person who killed her. The man across the hallway knew her schedule. He knew when she was home. He knew when she was alone. He knew she trusted him. For months, Elena had sensed something was wrong. She had written it down. She had documented the strange movements inside her apartment. She had even started investigating the man she feared. But she never realized how dangerous he really was. And perhaps the most chilling detail came after the trial. When detectives reviewed the building's security footage from the weeks before Elena's death, they discovered Daniel appearing outside her apartment dozens of times. Sometimes he stood there for only a few seconds. Sometimes he simply walked past. But on several occasions, he stopped directly in front of her door. And each time, he looked around first to make sure nobody was watching. Daniel had not suddenly become a killer on the night Elena died. The evidence suggested something much more disturbing. He had been watching her long before anyone knew there was a crime. He had lived next door. He had earned her trust. He had smiled at her. He had helped her carry groceries. He had held the spare key to her home. And while everyone else saw a quiet, helpful neighbor, Elena had been living beside a killer. So the next time you think you know the people living around you, remember this case. Sometimes evil doesn't look dangerous. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it offers to help. And sometimes the person you're trying to escape from is already standing right next door. This is a darker shade of truth. If this story kept you guessing until the end, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because there are darker stories waiting, and not every truth is meant to stay buried.